Welcome to the Explainer. We're coming in with some serious energy today because we are tackling one of the most widely misunderstood concepts in human history: peace. We throw that word around all the time, right? But what does it actually mean to achieve true peace, from the quiet stillness of our own minds all the way out to full-blown global harmony? Let's get into it. Is peace simply the absence of war? It's a super compelling thought. We usually just assume, hey, if bombs aren't falling and armies aren't marching, we're at peace. But I'm going to challenge that assumption right here. As the source material reveals, peace is so much more complex than just a temporary pause in fighting. If we only look at that surface level, we're completely missing the deep, structural heavy lifting required to actually build and sustain harmony.
Okay, let's dive into this explainer. We are going on a micro to macro journey today. We'll start by rethinking peace, then zoom into personal inner peace, before checking out conflict in education, the massive complexities of global peace, and finally, how this all works in the digital age.
Part 1. Rethinking the meaning of peace.
You know, the everyday definition of peace, which usually just means no active fighting, can actually mask some seriously deep societal pressures that are anything but peaceful. We really have to draw a line between true peace and what researchers call false or hegemonic peace. True peace is an open order. It actively favors the growth of every single element of society through just processes. False peace, on the flip side, is fundamentally unjust. It's a setup where ruling factions hold on to their privileges and maintain the status quo, which effectively silences the oppressed. So sure, it might look peaceful on the surface because no one is actively rebelling, but the underlying foundation is completely unjust.
This brings us to an absolutely crucial distinction: negative peace versus positive peace. Negative peace is simply the cessation of armed conflict. You withdraw the forces, you stop the shooting, and hey, that brings immediate relief, which is literally life-saving for daily survival. But positive peace, that is the actual structural work. That's rolling up your sleeves and constructing a just, humane, and equitable society by actively dismantling poverty, inequality, and political repression.
Moving on to Section 2, cultivating personal inner peace.
Let's zoom all the way in now, right down to the individual. We spend so much time obsessing over the massive, overwhelming problems of the world that we kind of forget to look at our own inner turmoil. And this brilliantly illustrates that idea. Thoughts are a wavering, disequilibrium state, like water bubbles. Thoughts rise, accumulate, burst, fall, recede, and evaporate, while inner peace is a stable state of absolute equilibrium. Eastern philosophies have long pointed out that modern life has essentially trained our incredibly capable minds into absolute chaos. True inner peace isn't just sticking your head in the sand and ignoring your problems, it's finding that stable baseline where you aren't constantly getting tossed around by the turbulent bubbles of your own thoughts.
So, how do we actually get to that equilibrium? The sources point us towards specific aspects of right mindfulness: being mindful of the body, the feelings, our mental formations, and the mind itself. Mindfulness basically drops an anchor right into the present moment. Think about it for a second. How often are we endlessly chasing some imagined future happiness? Running after 100 different conditions so we can finally be happy later just fuels our anxiety and completely robs us of peace today. By really looking deeply into the present, we usually find that the conditions for peace are already right here, right now.
Section 3. Conflict, Society, and Education. When we expand our focus from the individual back out to society, we run into a really surprising twist. Conflict is actually not the opposite of peace. When grievances are systematically ignored, conflict becomes a completely necessary catalyst for revolutionary social restructuring. This is a real paradigm shift. Sometimes what we look at and label a polarized society might actually only seem peaceful because people are literally too afraid of retaliation to speak up. In those situations, constructive conflict is exactly what's needed to dismantle outdated, exploitative structures so we can start building that genuine, positive peace we talked about earlier.
To wrap our heads around this dynamic, let's break down 3 basic categories of conflict. First, we have intrapersonal conflict, which is that internal battle within yourself, like wrestling with some really heavy emotions. Next up is interpersonal conflict, the classic clashes between individuals. And finally, substantive conflict, which involves deep-seated differences in core values or interests. The big takeaway here is that conflict resolution isn't about just forcing a quick handshake. It's about actively transforming the relationship between groups from a conflictual one into a desirable, collaborative partnership.
So how do we actually teach this to the next generation? The peace education process lays out 4 key steps: establishing a safe climate, enhancing emotional processing, building self-understanding, and considering alternative perspectives. Educators use what are called constructivist spaces to make this happen. Picture an unpoliced peace corner in a classroom, a space with absolutely no adult rules or interference. It gives students the freedom to explore these steps on their own, grapple with the real meaning of peace, and tap into their own natural capacity for nonviolence.
Section 4. The complexities of global peace.
Out on the global stage, things get messy. Peace treaties are so often just bandages applied to a festering sore if the underlying issues of justice are ignored. You could see this in how the UN's approach to peacebuilding has evolved over time. Back in 1992, the Security Council decided to expand its efforts way beyond just watching ceasefires. They wanted to actually establish conditions for sustainable peace. Then, in 93 and 94, we saw these massive, high-profile interventions in places like Somalia, Liberia, and Yugoslavia. But post-9/11, that focus really shifted amidst some intense controversies and totally conflicting interpretations of what peacebuilding should even look like. As we know, historical tragedies brutally expose the real-world constraints and sometimes the outright failures of these international interventions.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how stark the patterns become when we look at specific historical case studies. Take Sierra Leone. The negotiations there prioritized power sharing over actual justice. The outcome? It ended up legitimizing rebel actions and completely derailed any chance of true peace. Then look at Afghanistan. Over a period of 4 years, negotiations slowly shifted away from the core tenets of true peace and settled for standard political terms. By ignoring the fundamental structural conditions, it essentially guaranteed a return to violent civil conflict along ideological lines. The data shows that whenever the core tenets of justice get sidelined for temporary political power sharing, peace almost inevitably collapses.
And it's not just politics. Global peace is deeply impacted by massive environmental and social triggers. Take climate change, for example. It radically alters access to food and water resources, which directly spikes the likelihood of strategic, real-world conflict. Then you layer on the profound impacts of severe trauma on children and youth, coupled with unresolved historical grievances. All of these factors drastically alter human behavior and perception. Because of this incredibly dynamic landscape, global peace is never going to be a static, check-the-box achievement. It's an ever-renewable process that demands constant nurturing and adaptation.
Section 5. Peacemaking in the Digital Age. Which brings us to our final ripple, cyberspace. The sheer speed and reach of communication today have completely fundamentally reshaped how we experience conflict and diplomacy. Social media has this wild dual nature. On one hand, it's incredible at amplifying peacemakers. It connects massive grassroots movements like Occupy Wall Street, the Arab Spring, and Black Lives Matter, raising global awareness literally in seconds. But on the exact same platforms, it actively fuels violence. We're talking about AI-weaponized fake news, organized disinformation campaigns, the systemic dehumanization of targets, and the orchestration of so-called color revolutions. It has the power to connect billions of dispossessed people, while simultaneously acting as a highly effective weapon to coordinate hate and extremism.
So, what do we actually do about this new frontier? Well, cyber peace initiatives absolutely have to move beyond just basic non-military peacekeeping. We have to start figuring out how to rebuild and maintain peace after critical infrastructure gets damaged from cyber conflicts. Establishing a truly human-centered internet, doubling down on cybersecurity, and pushing for official UN-led cyber peace talks are no longer optional. They're absolute necessities. We've got to build these digital frameworks right now to stop online skirmishes from bleeding over into catastrophic real-world disasters.
As we've seen today, true peace is a continuous, deliberate action, not just an absence of noise. So the question I want to leave you with is this: how will you cultivate it in your own ripple of the world? Whether that means finally sitting down to find your own inner equilibrium, setting up a safe space for conflict resolution at work or school, or just navigating the digital world with a bit more mindfulness, the power to foster a genuine, just peace actually lies right with you. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this sparks your curiosity to keep exploring what the active pursuit of peace really looks like.